Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the first part of our two-part series, the Educator's AI Toolkit, Teaching and Assessing AI Conversations. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Liliana Olivas. I'm the Marketing Events Manager at Stukent, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today. As we begin, I want to encourage you to get familiar with the chat feature. Go ahead and start by sharing where you're from, what courses you're currently teaching. Maybe let us know what the weather's like in your part of the world. During the event, feel free to type in questions in the chat. We have an amazing team standing by to either answer your questions in real time or log them for a Q&A session at the end of the event. If you need to leave early, don't worry. We plan to share the recording with all the attendees along with any links and resources shared throughout this event. Before we get started, we do have an interactive activity planned for today's presentation. One of our team members will be reaching out to you privately in the chat to ask for your assistance. We appreciate your help with this. For those who are new to Stukent, our mission is to help you, help your students, help the world. We do this by providing course materials and Simternships in accounting, business, communications, and marketing to help bridge the gap between academia and industry. That's what we're doing today with this webinar. It's designed to give you actionable ideas and strategies to move beyond surface level AI use. Right now, you can click the pop-up below to explore Stukent site offerings, and once you've found a course match, with just a few clicks, you can get free instructor access to any of our Stukent Simternships and courseware. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to ask Dr. AJ Kuti and Dr. Krista Kuti to hop on stage. Dr. AJ Kuti is an assistant professor of accountancy at Georgia Gwinnett College with over 14 years of teaching experience. He holds a DBA in accounting from Marshall University and specializes in audit, fraud, CEO behavior, and AI in accounting. He has taught over 100 course sections and presents nationally on ethical AI use in higher education. Dr. Krista Kuti is a senior accounting analyst with Athens Clarke County Finance with over 14 years of experience in governmental accounting. She holds a DBA in accounting, and her expertise includes governmental accounting, audit quality, going concern opinions, internal audits, ACFR prep, fraud, and AI. Welcome, AJ and Kristen. We are so excited to have you join us today. I'm going to turn the time over to you and let you get started.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. We're excited, obviously, to be here and to talk about AI. We love talking about AI. We use it quite a bit. And I teach it in my college, so I'm looking forward to get into this. So we did start off with sharing a link with someone, I believe. And in that, there was a question, and I'm waiting for that person. If that person can jump on that link and answer that question for me, that would be wonderful. Yep, I see somebody's on there now, so I'm going to give that person another minute. And honestly, we have no idea who this person is. They're completely anonymous, completely random. But we wanted to try something. We wanted to kind of give you an idea of AI and what it can do. So we wanted to try something. But as that person is working, let's go ahead and begin going over the overview of this presentation. So we're going to go over the importance of prompting. So the whole purpose of this is really the idea behind prompting and the importance of prompting and how to prompt effectively and efficiently, elements that you need to know, strategies that you can use in prompting, and then also common pitfalls that you can have when it comes to prompting. And we see these very common among students now. So that's the flow. I want to go back to our example, and really this is dealing with the importance of prompting. So I'm going to now, the person who was, like I said, I don't have a clue who it was, but whoever had the link sent to them and they've put in their definition, I'm actually going to open it up now to everyone. So humor me a little bit. I'm going to put this on the board. If you can go to this website, or you can use the QR code, it takes you there. I want you to answer the question, but revising the initial person's definition. So there's a question on there, it says definition, revise that definition. I feel like we're all academics here, so we can probably come up with a pretty good definition of this question. And so hopefully there'll be, I don't know, 20 something people on here putting their input, making this definition the best we can get from a group of academics. So I want to give you, a couple minutes for this. If you find anything that needs to be added, changed, revised, took out, please feel free to do so. And then I will ask the person who initially created it to give it one more once over before officially submitting it, if you will. So again, this is always a fun thing to do with my students, and honestly, a fun thing to do with my colleagues and academics alike. I know some of you may be thinking, what does this have to do with AI? There's a good reason behind this. So give you about a minute or two to get the last minute details in there. And then I'm actually going to share that screen with you. It's always fun. Matter of fact, I guess I can do that now. We can see it live in action as it's being changed. It's going to be this one right here. So this is what I'm seeing. This is everybody on it. So yeah, it looks like there's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 people on here. That's wonderful. A lot of fun. We can make this the best ever. So let's go with probably another minute or so to get those last minute tweaks in there. And then we will close it up and go from there. So again, I'm not sure who the initial person was, but whoever the initial person was that was sent directly the link to start off with, I'm going to ask you to do the last minute revision. Like basically put everything that you see together in a single definition ready for submission. And then we will have our official answer. This is also a really good way I saw a story of an academic who allowed, or not an academic, a student who allowed all of Reddit to create, or to help edit their research paper.
I like the one where it's the hole in the water you pour your money into.
Hey, if you ask my brother that, he'd agree with that very, very much so. All right, so if the initial person would give me the once all be all definition, the final answer that we would submit if we are submitting this to something official. If you can give me that once over, and you can put it right after definition, you can refine it how you want. I'm not sure, like I said, I don't have a clue who the initial person was, but I appreciate all the participation. It's always fun when you have more participation in these things. So let's see, we'll go with, there's a few good things. So this was the original one. And so I guess we'll go with this one. So it says it's a vessel of various size that floats on liquid, may be controlled by human or computer, and maybe carry cargo or people or both. There's some other ones too. Again, the hole in the water, yeah, that's a pretty accurate one. So I'm going to go back to my slides now. And there we go. So the original question was, what's a boat? Believe it or not, you all just became AI, except you're not artificial. You are intelligent, but you just worked as if AI worked. You were given a prompt, and the prompt was, what is a boat? And the initial person was the predictor. The predictor basically says, okay, I'm predicting this is what you're looking for. And so they put their definition down. Now, you all as a whole group then came in and revised it. So you as the group became the model, okay? And the step-by-step process of editing became the algorithm. And each of you acted as a neuron within the neural network, bringing in their own experience, their own definition, their own level of thinking, their own learning to create this definition. And each round of this, people revising it, became a layer within the AI. And the initial person who started it off with some kind of watercraft in liquid or water created this pattern, and that became the pattern dominance within AI. But here's the thing, AI can only go based on what you give it. And I gave you this one simple prompt. And again, you all were the AI in this situation. I gave you one simple prompt. What's a boat? The problem is that maybe I wasn't looking for that definition. Maybe I was looking for something completely different. I'm going to change that prompt just a little bit, and I'm going to add something to it. What if I would have given you this? I was playing poker with some friends last night, and one of them said something about a boat. What's a boat? Well, that changes everything, because what they're referring to is not a watercraft on some liquid. What they're referring to is a slang term for a full house. And in the world of poker, if you get a boat, you have a full house, a 2 of a kind and a 3 of a kind. So how would you have known that? You wouldn't, based on this, because your natural tendency is to think of what most people think as a boat, the watercraft. But without that extra information, you wouldn't have been able to give me what I'm looking for. So again, that's exactly how AI works. And so again, the purpose of this and the importance of this is really the prompt. I didn't give you enough information, so you weren't able to really come up with an accurate answer of what I was looking for. You came up with an answer that you thought I was looking for based on that very simple prompt. So as we go through this, I want you to pay attention to some of these pieces that are really important in some of the prompts. This is the first layer of prompting. There's other layers, and you can go out and find many different ways of prompt engineering and what elements need to be in there. But these are the most common ones, and that's probably going to help you the most. So let's look at the elements of a strong prompt. So there's 4 main elements. Okay, the first one is what we call a role. And again, a role is basically just saying who's responding. How are you acting? How's the model supposed to be acting? Because you could give it the task, but if it doesn't know how it's going to act, then it doesn't know how to respond. It doesn't know how to think. And so think about this. If I were to say, analyze a balance sheet. I teach accounting, so this is really home to me. If I just were to put analyze this balance sheet, how would it analyze that balance sheet? It's probably going to give me some surface level overview. It's probably going to tell me that the assets equals liability plus equity, which is hopefully true. It may give me horizontal or vertical analysis. It may give me some ratio analyses. But based on what I told it, there's a lot of different avenues it can look. There's a bunch of different ways it can start to analyze things. But what if I were to give it a role? Say, you know what, I want you to act as an auditor, experienced in fraud examination. So now it's saying, hey, I don't want you to look at it just simply from a financial perspective and looking at it from financial accounting, but I want you to look at it more from an auditor perspective, looking to see where there may be some anomalies. Now I want you to analyze this balance sheet. And what that's going to do is it's going to shift that lens for AI from a general presentation and compliance check. So is it following GAAP? Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? All that kind of stuff. And it's going to shift it to an exploration of more internal control, potentially, or risk indicators, or potential red flags. These are all things that would fall more in the auditor side, but without it knowing, it can only assume what you're asking for. So a role is a fairly, it's a significant area, a significant piece of the prompt that we need to consider. Do you have to do this for every prompt? Absolutely not. These tend to be more of the initial prompt, just to get it going, get it thinking the way you want to. But the role, we do want to kind of add that as a manner of saying, hey, how are you going to think about this problem? Second one is the no-brainer. This is the one that we all include because it's the first thing we would think of, and that would be the task. So the task is just saying, what are you asking it to do? So again, this is obviously, I would say this is the most mandatory one, because without the task, you're not telling it what to do. A prompt without the task would be something like, you're a management consultant. And its reply is probably going to be, okay, sure. Okay, what do you want me to do? So naturally, a task is something that we want to say, hey, now that you know how you want to act, this is what I want you to do. So again, from a management side, you're saying you're management consulting. Assess this team's current workflow and provide 3 recommendations to reduce bottleneck. Now it's been established. The goal's been established. What it wants it to do, what we want it to do. And no the focus for the team workflow as it relates to specifically bottlenecking. So task, probably the one that we're most familiar with. That's the most common one, obviously, because we're telling it what to do. The next one, this one to me is arguably the most important one outside of task for obvious reasons, context. And this is going back to the activity we were just doing. Without context, you're missing a lot of information. So context is referring to what information should be used. Context to me, and from my experience of using AI as much as I have, context or the lack thereof typically is the reason why there's so many hallucinations, because it just makes assumptions if there's nothing there. If you leave a gap in your prompt or the gap in logic within the prompt, it has to make the assumption, and that tends to be where assumption may be wrong. So context is very, very important. Example, this one. Let's say you're marketing, you want it to act like a marketing strategist, and you tell it to develop a message for our new campaign. And that's all you give it. You say, I want some kind of message for this new marketing campaign. It's probably going to give you some of the most common things that we've heard for so many years, like our product improves your life, try it today, discover premium quality at a great price, or your satisfaction is guaranteed. These are things that you would expect from anything. It's very general, very vague, nothing that's going to be specific to your product, necessarily your business. However, we add context, and this is also to what makes prompts tend to be a little bit longer. But if we add it, let's say same thing, but this time we say the product is a high-end smartwatch targeted at fitness-oriented professionals, ages 30 to 45, who value data-driven performance insight. So now we've given it context. We've said, hey, this is what we want you to pay attention to, and this is what we want you to do or use when you do that task. And so what's it going to produce? It's going to now give you an output that's tailored to the message that's specific to your audience, to your positioning, to your value proposition. And again, this is just, obviously this is an example. You can go even further into that. But you do want to be careful with context, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on too. You don't want to go overboard with it. There's this balancing act that you have to have when it comes to the context. The fourth piece is kind of the optional one. The fourth piece would be what we call format. And format is basically saying, how should it respond? How should AI respond? What is the output? What should it look like? Again, you don't have to add this one to every one of them. But if you're looking specifically for a specific output, then naturally you want to add that in there. So if you don't want this long drawn out explanation from AI, you can say, hey, keep it to 3 bullet points, or keep it, concise. Only explain this. So an example of this, you're an economist and you ask it, explain how a decrease in interest rate affects consumer spending. And then you give it a context. Assume the economy is in a mild recession and unemployment is elevated. You've given it the role, you've given it the task, and you've given it the context. That's going to give you a really good output. It's going to probably be long, and there's going to be some things that you may be missing. It's going to possibly be a single dense paragraph of mixed theories, macro trends and behavior. I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination. It could give you a muddled explanation where key ideas are buried. It's going to give you the information. It's just going to be a lot of information. Whereas you can also take that and say, you know what, I'm going to keep the same stuff, but I'm going to add format. I want you to do the same thing, but this time I want you to provide a causal chain showing sequential effects, followed by a 2-sentence summary interpreting the impact under recession conditions. So now I've said, hey, I want it to look like this, and I want this is what I want the output to look like. And now it has produced a logical step-by-step recession-specific explanation that is digestible for the classroom use, if that's what you're using it for, clearly demonstrating the economic reasoning. So we have now narrowed how it gives it to us, because anybody that's used AI knows that the output can be pretty long. Depending on how you've trained it under your methods, it may tend to give you a very lengthy, long-winded explanation. So this kind of gives you the ability to whittle things down if you need to, or if it needs to look like a certain chart, a certain graph, if you need it in a table, especially if you're doing compare and contrast and stuff like that. So again, these are just the basic 4 elements. There are some other elements that you could add in there. This is tier 1. You can go up to tier 2 and tier 3 as you get more advanced in AI. But this is basically what I tend to teach my students, and they start to see the difference from what they were doing to what they are doing now. So I'm going to turn this over now to my wife, who is going to talk about strategies.
Yes, thank you. And first, I apologize. I have a cold, so I sound a little bit off right this second. But as we talk about the different strategies for prompting, there are various strategies that can be used, and it really just depends on the information that we have on hand, what kind of time frame that we have that we can place on it, and even what kind of output that we desire. So as we start with the first one, it's the iterative process. Now, the iterative process, we always, think about the saying of peeling back the layers of an onion. Well, this is building up that onion. So it's a cyclical method where you continue to refine a prompt until you continue building on that incrementally to improve that accuracy in that output. So it's kind of like with humans, we start simple when we learn something, we gain an understanding on that, and then we continue to add layer after layer. And so that's the same with these refinements of these prompts. Now, the iterative process strategy, it's going to be most beneficial when there's maybe that first output is a little close, but not quite there yet. So we just need to add a little bit of context and structure to it. And so that next output will be just a little bit more accurate and clear. So especially if you have like multi-step reasoning or problems, then you can work step by step in this process. But the iterative process strategy is not going to be beneficial if we have limited time, because as we do multiple steps in this refinement, it's going to take some time. So if you're in a hurry, it's not going to be beneficial. And then if you need that first output to really be accurate and reliable, so let's say we're doing an audit testing query. Well, we want that output to be reliable. We don't want to have to refine that over and over, and so that it ends up being incorrect and causing us errors as we move forward. Next is chunking. So this is the process of really, when you have a large data set, you want to break that down into pieces so that it's more manageable for AI. And what this does is sometimes AI can get overloaded and overwhelmed. Even for my daughter, I tried to create a practice test for her of about 200 tests. It could not create 200 questions and keep them individually. It kept duplicating. Thank you. Duplicating the questions over and over. And so I had to go back down and ask it to do about 25 at a time. So just taking those large tasks and breaking it down into smaller pieces. Now, an example of this could be also if we have a set of financial statements. We're not going to throw all of those financial statements in there at once and say, can you analyze these statements for me? We really need to break that down and say, maybe can you summarize the liquidity ratios in a specific statement? So be more specific, concise on what we're asking it so that it can give a more accurate output. Next, we have shot prompting. And what this is we're going to ask AI to think about how it should respond before it actually does the task. Now, this goes back to what kind of format do you want it? So maybe you're providing an example of like a journal entry or a table, a specific format that you want it in and that you want it to replicate. So instead of having those long drawn out responses, maybe you just want it in some bullet forms, a journal entry format, something like that. And this helps provide that output that you're desiring. It stays consistent as well. Now, this shot prompting strategy, it's really beneficial when you have that formatting requirement and some logical reasoning requirement. But if you need some open-ended creativity in there, such as brainstorming, well, when you go ahead and provide the limitations around it, going ahead and kind of creating a bias for it. So it's not really going to be helpful if you want that creativity and to help you brainstorm, come up with new ideas and things like that. The next strategy that we talk about is role-playing prompting. And what this is we go back to giving AI really, what kind of role are you playing in this story? So if we have the example, you are a forensic accountant preparing to testify as an expert witness in a case. And so we're giving it, it's going to be a forensic accountant, and it's going to have to provide that detail as if it were an expert witness. So we're giving it the voice, the context, the depth of the response that we desire that output to be in. And what that does is it helps kind of tailor the output to the audience that we're going to be presenting this information to. Now, you can also use this strategy if you need those different viewpoints. So going back to, do you need to have a viewpoint from an auditor standpoint versus maybe a regulator standpoint? And you can also use these strategies in maybe some interview simulations or training sessions, or maybe you're doing some consultations. So it can also help in those type strategy and situations.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the big one for my class is, being able to tell the students, hey, you can use this for practicing interviews, practicing, connecting with people, asking, good questions, finding out good questions, how to answer questions in an interview. I think that's a huge one on the role-playing side, because it's not what you naturally think of.
Yeah, but when we also put in those roles, again, we're going back and we're creating that bias and those limitations. So it goes back to, if you need it to be more of a out-of-the-box brainstorming kind of process, then this won't be the most beneficial, because we have provided that role and that limitation that we're expecting that output on. And then we have meta prompting strategy. And what this one is, it's asking it to tell us really, how are you going to go about this strategy and this prompt before we actually do the task. So we think about this as more of a self-reflective strategy. So if we had the example of finding those potential red flags, we're not going to just say, can you find those red flags, but really maybe we start with, before you analyze, can you outline the steps that you're going to take to find those red flags? And what that does is it allows us to see those individual steps, see if it's actually correct or not, refine those steps if need be, maybe add some, take some out, give it some more context and structure. And that allows that transparency to be there, especially if you're going, like in the auditing world, things like that. You really need to know what's going on behind the scenes, and so you can make sure that it's accurate. So if you need that transparency there, meta prompting is a great strategy. And this step, it also takes time though. So if you're in a hurry, this one's not going to prove most beneficial. And if breaking any of the information into pieces along the way, or it's got a simple fact-based problem already, then it's really not going to be most beneficial, because there's really not going to be any value added, because there's not a whole lot of steps in between. So that transparency is not going to add a lot of details at that moment.
Yeah, and two, the big thing about this, especially when we're teaching in classes, is trying to get past looking at AI as the easy fix. As you can tell with these strategies that we're talking about, these are not things that are going to be done quickly. These are things that's going to take time. It's going to take effort too. Is this chunking? Chunking is one of those ones where if you have a task or something that you need to be done or completed, you have to first put in the effort to break it down into those chunks. And so that's a skill in of itself. Being able to break it down into chunks that is manageable for the AI, as well as going in and figuring out, okay, how do I prompt this so that it can do what I'm looking for? Same thing with meta prompting. It's kind of a working backward situation where you're saying, okay, how are you going to do this first before we even get into it? Role playing, again, you're setting it up. So these are all things, iterative process. That's probably the one I live most by, is the iterative process, because I go in there with the idea of as it comes to the end goal, I may not know the best way. So I'm going to work with AI to see if it knows a better path forward to completing this, or is there something I'm not thinking about? So it does take time. It takes trial and error. It does take different prompts, and I've had it where I've probably spent 50 to 75 prompts on a task just to get it to what I need it to do. And so have my students. I teach an AI and accounting class, and one of the things that I had them do is they had to create a dynamic spreadsheet, and it was a very complex dynamic spreadsheet. And I just said, here's what you need to do. I didn't give them the parameters. I didn't give them any, I didn't break it up in chunks for them. They had to figure that out. That's part of the process. And they ended up loving it because they realized what it could do, but it takes time. It does take time. All right, so those are the strategies for prompting, effective prompting. Let's talk about some common pitfalls of prompting. So there are, I think we've listed 10 here. We're going to try to go through them as time permits. We can bounce back and forth, but I do want to highlight probably the biggest ones that I've seen or I've talked to students about. Obviously, some of these are related to the elements and the strategies that we talked about, because if you're not doing those, then naturally it's going to create some kind of hindrance. But let's start with the vagueness trap. So the vagueness trap, if we can get through all 10 of these, it'd be great. The vagueness trap, so think about this, like you were to put a prompt in that says, hey, analyze our supply chain and recommend improvements. That's super vague. I mean, again, the big piece here is you're missing context. You're missing that context piece. You're just saying, hey, do this task for me, and I want you to assume. So the impact on the AI output here is it's going to rely on unstated assumptions, and that's what leads to hallucinations. It's going to it misses some of the necessary context, and it produces generic, and we've all seen those, and we could probably all see students have submitted those before, very generic output. It doesn't go very deep into it. So again, if you're going in there with the intent of, hey, I just want to get this done quickly and just let it do what it needs to do, I'm going to put a little bit of effort. Honestly, it's very much like anything else that we see in class. If you put in a little bit of effort, it's not going to give you the best answer. It's going to take time. On the other side of that, though, the vagueness trap, you have what we consider the overload problem. Overload problem is you put too much in there. You overload it. So look at this potential prompt. It says, design a comprehensive information system that integrates CRM, ERP, supply chain analytics, cybersecurity controls, AI-driven forecasting, data governance policies, cloud architecture. I don't even know what some of these are. And regulatory compliance. And also explain how it should be implemented. Now, I'm sure you can see somebody doing that. You may have potentially put in something like that where it's super complex. You need them to do a task that has a lot of steps, and you just put it into a single prompt. When you do that, it's going to overload the system, overload the AI. It's going to pick and choose. It tends to pick and choose which task it wants to focus its energy on, and then it's going to give you some surface level output because it's got so much going on. So again, here, the impact on the output here is going to be logical gaps. There's, again, with all these things, I'm sure there's interconnectivity between all these things, but they're independent in their own right too. It's also going to give you some inconsistencies. It's going to reduce the accuracy because you've got so many competing levels of thought here. And it's going to overgeneralize. And two, it's going to look at it like a checklist. It's going to say, okay, I've done this, I'm going to check it off, but not necessarily connecting them together the way you want it to do.
I would say there too, if you break it down into pieces, you want to make sure that you break it into pieces that still flow together. So making sure that there's no logic, like you said, that's missed. So if breaking it into certain pieces will disrupt that thought process, then you can't maybe break it into down in a different way.
Well, this is a prime example of why chunking what chunking would be so good for, is because you're breaking it down into those chunks to say, okay, I want to start with this. And then as you get the answer to that, then you want to add in another prompt that ties in with that, but gives them the next task and so on and so forth. So this is a prime example of what chunking would be really beneficial in using. The next one is one I see probably the most students doing, and that is the one and done mentality. One and done mentality, as you can imagine, I want to put in one prompt and be done. So it is the belief that a single prompt should produce a final, usable, and correct answer.
And they're all going to get the same answer.
And they're all going to get the same answer, and it's probably not going to be contextually connected to whatever you're looking for. but they just want to get it done quickly. So they put in the prompt, and honestly, from what I've seen, they copy and paste the prompt that you give them or the question that you give them and see what the output is. But you can't go into AI and using AI with that mentality, because you have to understand that you do need to be skeptical. One, you want to make sure that you understand that not everything is factual. It does make mistakes. It does make errors. So you want to be skeptical about the output that it does generate. But you also want to understand that again, this is a perfect example of the iterative process. You're going to go through and you're going to say, hey, what can I do to make it better? Or what can I change the logic here that there was a gap, or fill that gap so that assumptions are not being made. So I usually, when I have a conversation with AI, it's a pretty lengthy conversation. A lot of times my initial prompt is actually longer than the output that it generates. Because I want to give it the information it needs to, obviously not too much, but I want to kind of make sure I'm steering it in the right direction. Missing role, or that obviously the impact on the output here is going to be overconfident in your first draft response, missing opportunities, unchecked errors. Again, we want to be skeptical. Missing role, again, we talked about the importance of the role or the audience. So again, if you're saying analyze the company's declining gross margin and explain what it is, it's always good to have that role, because I'll say this from an accounting standpoint. Do you want it to look at the problem or attack the task from a compliance and regulatory standpoint, which is financial accounting, or do you want to look at it from a decision-making standpoint? That's more managerial accounting. So having that role to be able to look and distinguish between the two, it's going to help provide you an output that's going to be, more closely related to or more accurate to what you're looking for. The impact here, inappropriate focus. So again, technical versus strategic, answers that satisfy no specific stakeholders, and misalignment of tone, maybe level of complexity or level of detail. Format ambiguity. Again, this one's probably not, obviously it's a pretty common one, but it's not a huge one. So we can say evaluate whether the company should discontinue product B. What it's going to give you is this long list of things. Like, it might be hard. You have to scroll back and forth to really look at the comparison. So it's going to be disorganized. You might rather just say, hey, put it in a table, column A, column B, and show me the comparison between the two. It makes it really visually appealing and easier to follow along. And that way you don't have to keep up with all of that fluff that it adds in the text. Ignoring ethical, and this is obviously something big we want to focus in our classroom, is the ethical usage of this. So ignoring ethical and verification steps. We want to look at this ethically, and we want to look at it skeptically as well. So this is an example of this is accepting AI output as fact, when it's not necessarily always going to be the case, without checking for accuracy or also bias. I know in my class, I have them look at a 10K report using AI and help them analyze it just to kind of get the start of using AI. And they don't verify it. Sometimes AI draws it from the 10Q and not the 10K. And so it's a hard lesson that they learn pretty quickly, is that it's not always right. Over polished and over restrained prompts. This one is interesting. So going back to the context and the importance of context, you can have too little context and it really has an ulterior effect, or a negative effect. But you can also have too much context. You can have things that's over polished, too much context, too much detail. So for instance, you can put in here, like, write a highly professional, upbeat, on-brand marketing email announcing our new product launch. Avoid negative language, avoid uncertainty, keep it concise, inspirational, and polished. There's a lot of what I call parameters in there that you have created for the AI model to use. And the problem with that is that it starts to, you're limiting it as to what it really can do, which is the creativity side. When you put too much context in there, you're actually adding your own bias. So if you say, hey, do all this, and I'm going to add all this nice stuff, why it's positive in the context, then it's naturally going to have a positive outlook. Or same thing, if you say, can you tell me why I shouldn't do this? And here are all the negative reasons why I shouldn't do this. You're giving it too much of a biased context. And so it's going to take that bias and run with it. It's going to give you a pattern dominance, much like the prompt that we did at the very beginning, where the initial reaction was, hey, it's a watercraft. And once I saw that, then we kind of built on top of that. Again, this is going to lead to personal cognitive biases, loss of nuance, and style prioritization. The next one is near and dear to my heart because I have ADD like crazy. It's prompt drifting, and this is actually probably a good segue. It would be a good segue into the next part of the series, in where we talk about how to grade prompting, because students will do this quite a bit too. So prompt drifting is something like this, where you ask it, why might stock prices diverge from financial statement analysis? And then it gives the output, and you would hope that the students would read the output, and then from there create another question from that, come up with another question that follows up with that. But no, they put in this one. What non-accounting factors influence stock prices? It deals with stock prices, but it's not tied to the original question. And then they ask the next question of how should investors weigh accounting information against the other signals? These are all things that you would probably ask in a prompt for an assignment. You say, okay, here's your assignment. I want you to answer these 3 questions, but these are 3 independent questions. If the students ask these 3 independent questions back to back to back, they're drifting in their prompting. There's no connection from one to the next. It would feel like, and this is how I grade my prompts, it almost feels like a student copied and pasted the prompt into AI. AI created an output. They didn't read it, and then they copied and pasted the next one, and then the next one. And so what we're looking for is a connection between prompt over prompt, because that's going to give a level of thinking. It's going to create this consistency within the level of thinking. Again, if we do this prompt drifting, it's going to give us some kind of inconsistent analytical framework. Outputs that feel coherent, so technically right, but they answer different problems, and also creating that hidden bias as well. The last 2 are more, basic stuff that we need to understand about models. So if we're ignoring a model limit, so I could ask it, hey, use supply and demand to predict how raising the minimum wage will affect employment. It has limitations. It's still learning, and it doesn't have access, not necessarily to your company's supply and demand or current information. So it's not 100% current either. So it's going to overstate certainty. It's going to give you an answer, and it's going to give it to you real confidently, but it might not be wrong. It's going to be confidently incorrect. Failure to acknowledge assumptions, application of simplified models, conclusions presented as universal rather than conditional. So you want to be mindful of what limitations that the model has that you're using. And finally, a lack of self-reflection. Again, this is one that we tend to forget. And this is just failing to reflect why you prompted a certain way and what changes after refinement. One of the best tools that I think, and we use ChatGPT quite a bit. One of the best tools that I've found is that kind of edit your prompt. So you write your prompt in there, it gives you an output, but the output's maybe not what you're looking for. So you can go back and edit your original prompt and run it again. I love that feature because what you're doing is you're going back and saying, okay, that didn't work. But what if I gave you this extra bit of context? Or what if I changed this a little bit? Or what if I asked in a different way? And there's been many times where I would be trying to work through a problem and I'll say, hey, all right, let's start over. Let's look at it from a different angle. And I would put the new prompt in there, and that would be part of my prompt. Let's start over. Let's look at it from a different angle. That would be part of my prompt. And so the lack of self-reflection, because in this process, we're also learning as well. So impacts here, there's no assessment of relevance or quality, missed learning and judgment development. To me, I think this is one of the ones where we start to decline on critical thinking. We want to make sure that we still maintain critical thinking. It's still a big process in this. We're using AI as a tool and not the end all be all answer. So AI replaces thinking instead of supporting it. We want to teach students how to use it for what it is, and that's the assistance, the tool. And those are the 10 common pitfalls that we found. That is what we have. I think we have some time for any questions. I think Lily.
Yes. Hello, thank you so much, AJ and Kristen. That was a great presentation. We're just launching up a couple of actions. If anyone wants to connect with AJ or Kristen, we have their LinkedIns featured here as well. And then you also have a slide. So feel free to connect with them. Before we kick off the Q&A session, I'm going to give you guys some time to add any questions that you might have for AJ and Kristen. I did want to chat about a new resource that we're working on at Stukent. We pride ourselves on creating tools that educators and students want and love to use. AJ and Kristen have partnered with us to build an AI in accounting micromodule to help support the use of AI in your accounting courses. You're going to see a link at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and click the link on the screen. This is going to take you to an AI suite page where you can join the waitlist for the AI and accounting micro module. And you can also get free instructor access to our AI and marketing micro module and our Gen AI Essentials courseware. So go ahead, I'll give you a little bit of time to click the link. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I did want to ask AJ and Kristen, there's a lot to keep in mind when we are discussing prompts, and there's a lot of time that needs to be given to how you're entering your questions. So how do you cover all of this information with your students? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So for me, it's much like what we did today is we kind of go through it and we say, okay, here are some important pieces. Do you need them all the time? So, and again, I'm not saying that I use all 4 elements that we discussed every single time that I prompt. I use them for different things. Again, my main ones are going to be obviously the task, but the context is a big one. And I'll use a role in there, depending on if I need a specific way of thinking. But I say, okay, here's the things that are important that you can consider including, but honestly, I just tell them, go and play around. Don't look at this as you're trying to complete a task. Look at this as you are working with AI to complete something over multiple prompts. It's not a one and done kind of thing. And the more you get into it, the more you start to see, okay, this is more useful in a prompt. If I say it this way, or if I include this information, and they start to see that, and they start to see that there is a pattern. And then as such, they start to move forward in their growth with prompting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We do have a question from Dr. Scott. He asks, what is your take on the evolution of prompt engineering to context engineering?
With models and their hyperbolic growth that we're seeing, every time a new model comes out, it's achieving new heights, I guess you'd say, new ways of thinking, hitting new standards. It's going to be an evolution. It's one that we can't not consider. I think it's going to be inherent in the way that we interact with it and the way it grows, that we move from prompt to context. But prompt engineering is always going to be a major piece. It's always going to be something that we have to consider as educators and as we're getting into students. I was actually in a meeting earlier this morning. It's prompting is important, and obviously it's the first step. But to me, prompting is like debits and credits in accounting. You have to learn it, but it's very foundational. Once you get it, then you can expand your knowledge on it. You can grow from it, but you still got to have that foundational level of knowledge. And it's not the end goal. How to prompt is not necessarily the end goal. It's teaching students how to use it ethically, use it skeptically, use it to me, one of the biggest things for students is being able to teach them how to discern when to use AI and when not to use AI. Like, when is it better just to go about it at your own because it's just not necessary? Once you get to that point, I think we have hit that milestone of saying, okay, now we're using it for what it is, which is the assistance, versus using it to, do it for us, basically.
Yeah, and they have to learn, because we have one child that's in middle school and they're already teaching them how to do AI and prompt and, but they can't, teach bits and pieces. They have to, like you said, know how to use it ethically and when to use it and how to prompt. And
yeah, our middle one came to me and she was like, well, they told us we got to write a paper and then we're going to put it into AI and ask it to edit it. And so they give them the prompt to use for editing. And she says, but every time I put it in there, it tells me something's wrong. And I have to tell her, like, that is how AI works. If you tell it to find something, it will find something. And so it was a learning step for her too.
That's great to hear. All right, let's move on to the next question from Denise. How do you AI proof assignments after training students how to use AI more effectively?
So this is probably the biggest question we have. And obviously it revolves around, the concern of cheating. And in cheating, I mean, let's be honest, cheating has been around before AI. But for me personally, so for instance, my financial accounting class, they have their discussion board where they have to go in there and they have to put a 10K on AI, go through and have it analyze some things have a conversation with them. And it creates a report. And I tell them, I want you to copy and paste that report directly from AI to the discussion board. And then I tell them, but I'm not grading that. I couldn't give a rip about what the AI report is because AI generated it. And the only reason I tell them to put the report on the discussion board is because that's what other students use to have a discussion with. So they read that short little piece. What I do is I grade their prompts. So I have them submit their chat conversation link, which gives me access to their conversation, and only their conversation, not all the other conversations they have, but just that chat page. And I have access to it and I go through it and I read it and I read every prompt and I look for things like, are they prompt drifting? Are they simply just copy and pasting the questions that I put on there just to get past it? Are they actually asking critical thinking questions as a follow-up to what the AI created? It's a big shift from academia. Like thinking about it, we're not grading the output, we're grading the input. We don't typically do that a whole lot. And so it was one thing that I had to get past. But once we got that, they start to see it. In my AI and accounting class, I do grade the output, but the fun thing for me with that class is because it's upper level too. I basically said, it's a big simulation that they're working on. I said, here's the task. And that's basically it. I don't give them parameters. I don't say it has to look this way. It has to do this way. I just say, I want it to function like this. I want it to be a dynamic page. And I have my way of doing it. And I have students that have emailed me and said, hey, I know you said, you want it to function like this, but I think I figured out a way to do it better, more effectively. And I'm like, by all means, do it better, because I want to see that. And so giving them the ability to think outside the box, that's really a fun one. So giving them, accounting's not really, you can't be real creative in accounting, you'll go to jail for that. Giving them that level of creativity, you really start to see these students put a lot into it, and they'll find some things that you're not expecting. So AI proofing from the side of cheating, it's just, we got to look at it in a different way. And again, teach students when to use it and when not to. That's a big thing for us.
Wonderful, thank you. The next question is from Nicole. What is the best, or maybe an AI that you recommend for use in academia?
I mean, the one that comes to mind is ChatGPT, just because it's accessible. So that way you don't have to worry about having students having to pay for the paid version. You can use the free version, still get just as good of results. You don't necessarily need the 5.2 that's out there right now. You can deal with the 4.1 or 4.0 models. Those are just as good as any of the other ones. You can have Copilot, from a instructor position, and same thing from a practitioner side too. You do have to pay attention to the security. I was going to say FERPA, but practitioner wouldn't necessarily have FERPA, but FERPA compliant or security side of it. You do have to pay attention to those. So you don't want to put anything in there that has anybody's name in it. You want to sanitize everything. as best as you. I mean, obviously, you don't want to put any identifying information in there. So you be careful of that. But ChatGPT is a good one. There's a lot of good ones for research, really good ones for research now that are coming out. Those are the ones that came to my mind. One of the things that I like was it's called Lit Maps. So when you're doing your literature review and you're trying to find papers that connect with each other, Lit Maps is a good one, and Connected Papers is a good one. Connected Papers looks at papers that connect with each other, but not simply from the references. Lit Maps looks at references. So was it tagged or was it cited in this paper, and it connects all of them into a map. Connected Papers looks at a little bit more deep and says the topic of this one matches with the topic of this one. It may have not have been cited, but they're connected. And that was a really good one when you're doing research.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those resources. The next question is from Maria. This is specifically relating to online classes. How do you modify class assignments to be able to measure your students' understanding or comprehension of course material?
So the AI and accounting class that I did teach, that was an online class. And I taught it basically like I would teach it. I am teaching it in the fall as an in-person class too, but I taught it basically the same way, mainly because it was dealing with the projects. So it's a higher level of accounting. It requires them to do multiple projects where they have to do projects using AI in financial accounting, managerial accounting, and audit. So basically what I've learned is the biggest difference, one of the biggest differences between a class that uses AI and a class that doesn't use AI in terms of the projects and the assignments that you have them do is when you allow them to use AI, you can make the projects a lot more complex. And so again, I'm not sure if you're in accounting or if you're outside, but in accounting, one of the areas that we have that we do a lot with is bank reconciliation. And if you do a bank reconciliation problem in class for financial accounting, you're probably looking max, probably 8, 9, maybe 10 transactions or points that you have to consider putting it on, whether it be the bank side or the book side. I did something like that in my AI and accounting course, and I actually had, I want to say it had 250 transactions or 250 points that they had to consider. Another one in the audit class, looking at red flags for fraud. You may have, 100 observations, 100 rows in Excel that you're looking for. Ours has right now 500, and we're moving it up to 1,000. So what it does is allows you to put more complexity in there, put more data in there, and they tend to like that. I mean, I heard a lot of good feedback because it's not just your basic, like, here's one of this category, and here's one of this category, here's a banking error, here's a bookkeeping error, and here's the outstanding checks. Like, you can get pretty far in there, and it gives them real world application too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, some of the links that you mentioned, Marilyn is asking if we can provide those. You don't have to do that right now, but Marilyn, we will be sharing a list of resources, and then we will try to get those links shared after the webinar. We just have one last question from Dr. Scott. He's wondering your thoughts on the differences in prompting with a reasoning model versus a thinking or basic query.
So I'm not 100% knowledgeable, I guess I should say, or not knowledgeable, but my area of confidence, I guess you would call it, isn't necessarily on the thinking or basic query side of things. The basic reasoning model, which is kind of what we're thinking of when we think of ChatGPT and stuff like that. That's what I'm more familiar with. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, this is kind of the difference between generative AI and machine learning. Whereas they're all under the AI umbrella, but you're looking at it from the perspective of generative AI allows you to, or allows it to think relatively, on its own, making deductions and using reasoning to make decisions on its own, versus machine learning is more of this, I kind of look at it as rote memorization. If you think of a student learning how to do a problem, and the way they learn how to do that problem is they do it over and over and over and over again, that one problem, but then they get to the test and the problem doesn't look the same. So they flip out, and they think that they forgot it. It's just they didn't learn it in that way. I kind of look at those two things in the same, looking at reasoning model versus thinking, or basic query. I could be wrong. I'm not well versed in the thinking and basic query. So.
No problem. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, AJ and Kristen. We appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. You are welcome to hop off stage. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. If you're interested in joining the waitlist for the new AI and accounting micro module or getting free instructor access to any of our AI resources, feel free to click the link below. At Stukent, we believe that great educators create great futures. That's why we've built resources that help you do more than just teach. It will help you engage, inspire, and prepare your students to excel in the workforce. From everyone on the Stukent crew, thank you for joining us. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and until next time.